The Navy was at the forefront of innovation during the early years of aviation. In fact, it was 3 Naval Academy graduates who made the first transatlantic flight. On this episode of A History of the Navy in 100 Objects, we trace the development of aviation from the young naval officers through the first non-stop flight across the Atlantic by Colonel Charles Lindbergh. Charles Swift, the managing director of the museum, fills us in with the details.
I'm Charles Swift, Managing Director of the United States Naval Academy Museum, talking today about early aviation efforts and the ultimate successful transatlantic flight of Colonel Charles Lindbergh. The dream of early aviation pioneers had been the ability to fly over the Atlantic Ocean, connecting Europe and America. Before the World War I, an English newspaper had offered a prize to the first aviators who were able to fly a plane across the Atlantic in 72 hours. What this meant was that the plane could stop, refuel, but it would have to cross in 72 hours. World War I interrupted this, but World War I also brought another challenge for the United States Navy. As airplanes had shown to become increasingly important in the fighting in World War I, the idea of shipping planes from the United States over to the battlefields in Europe caused problems. Airplanes are bulky, they take up space, and a request was made to see if airplanes could actually fly themselves from the United States to Europe rather than having to be transported by ship. In May of 1919, the first transatlantic flight was completed by 3 Naval Academy graduates flying Curtiss airplanes from the United States to England. It took them several stops and several weeks in order to make the trip, but they proved that this could be done. A few weeks later, however, 2 English pilots made the transatlantic journey in under 72 hours, thus winning the prize offered by the English newspaper and much more attention than the U.S. naval aviators. Ultimately, this leads us to Charles Lindbergh, who flies across the Atlantic in 1927, nonstop, solo. While Lindbergh successfully made it across the Atlantic nonstop in 1927, he relied on the United States Navy to bring both him and his airplane back to the United States. One of his first stops upon his return to the United States was the Navy Department, where he gave them a full debrief about his flight and the future for transatlantic crossings. All of this would become very important in coming years with the advent of World War II.
The Navy continues to be innovative in the aviation field, with the new aircraft carrier, advanced uses of drones, and the F-35 jet, to name a few. We hope you can come to the museum soon to track the development of naval aviation for yourself. Thanks for joining us today on A History of the Navy in 100 Objects.